There is a general consensus amongst the scholars and the historians, particularly the historians, that you cannot understand present without making references to the past. Similarly, in the context of media, how to make sense of the present times, in the times of the digital technology, how to make sense of the times we live in, the times of internet, the times of information. There are scholars in media, there are media historians who talk about the very idea of referring back to the past and making sense of the contemporary reality. This course is about delving deeper into the pages of the history and knowing what is it that media has done in the past as opposed to what it is doing in the present times. The course starts with the question of orality. It looks into the societies which were completely dependent on oral means of communication. We refer to the scholars who have done the work on orality. This course is questioning what is it that was so specific and unique about living in oral societies. When we were primarily oral beings in the beginning, when we evolved in language and various other things, what is it that we did with respect to orality? What kind of a society was existing there? So we refer to the Vedic times, we refer to the very idea of Vedas being transmitted orally over centuries and how those Vedas were composed in a way which was metrical, which was rhythmic, which was poetical, and what was the characteristic of the oral societies. So once the writing is invented, we also see what is the consequence, what are the consequences of the writing on the society. What is it that writing did to the society? So there are a lot of scholars who have probed into this question, and there are these media historians who have got into the question of what did happen to the society when the technology of writing was invented. So we refer to, for example, Plato. Plato talked about writing because he was very much critical of writing at the same time he was writing. So that's a kind of a paradox Plato lived in, because a lot of scholars have said that Plato was the product of writing. Once we are done with the question of investigating what is it that writing did to the society, we go into the question of manuscript tradition. We say that how were manuscripts transmitted, how they were written, who were the scribes, what was the scribal culture, what was the manuscript tradition. Was the society which was dependent on the manuscript tradition very different from the society which was dependent on just mere writing on the parchments and the tablets and the clay tablets? Most of the scholars in the who teach media history, they start the history of media from the printing technologies. Then we enter into the discussion of what is it that printing technology did to the world. We go into the inventions of wood block printing, and then we also go into the question of what is it that movable type printing did to the world. We go into the case study of Gutenberg. We look at the rise of capitalism, we look at the rise of Protestant Christianity, we look at the idea of nationalism, how it is linked to the very idea of media. So most of the philosophies which we have borrowed in the present times, for example, the idea of a nation state, for example, the values which we have taken from the French Revolution, such as the idea of equality, liberty, fraternity. A lot of scholars, for example, Elizabeth Eisenstein, who has written a book called Printing Press as an Agent of Change, she talks about how these consequences of printing are interconnected to the very idea of media technology. What is it that television did to society in India? For example, in the contemporary times, if you look at the various political formations, if you look at various cultural formations, if you look at various socio-cultural different types of formations, you will see that the television played a very fundamental role in changing the consequences of the society we live in. There are very few scholars who have investigated into the question, what is it that television did to society? What is it television did to politics in India? What is it television did to culture in India? So we are delving deeper into these questions. And finally, when we come to the internet technology, we go into the history of internet. We go, for example, into the question of making of the analytical engine by Charles Babbage. We go into the idea of the Turing machine. We also go into the idea of, for example, the history of the computers. So through exploration of the digital technology, we try to understand what is it that has happened to the society because of the coming of the internet. What is it that internet has done to the society? What this course brings new is the very idea of involving the students in working on these research projects. For example, in my class, there are students who are working on media histories in different parts of India. You have students coming from different parts of India. So I just ask them questions, for example, what is the history of media in your particular place? If there are international students, they will talk about the history of media in their particular place. So what they do is they will go into the archives. There is National Archives of India, there is Nehru Museum Memorial Library, there must be some archival department of Karnataka, must be some archival department in each and every state. For example, who brought the first newspaper of Hyderabad? Who brought the first newspaper in Delhi? So these regional explorations have to be taken care of, and our students are getting into that direction. They understand the very dynamics of doing archival research, which is something very refreshing, I would say, in terms of taking a course on history of media. There is an expectation that by the end of this particular course, the students will be able to publish at least 5 pages from the research which they do. So which makes them also in a position to have the publication in the very beginning of the training in media studies.